All right, guys, welcome back. So, what is breathwork? Now, I'm going to go in the ins and outs for you with this technique and how to do it properly so you get maximum results. So, what is breathwork? Well, it's exactly what the name is. It's your breathing, and it's a lot of work. Now, don't let that scare you. I know for a lot of you, you don't like your job, and so that work has a bad, reputation. But without work, we can't create anything. Like without doing, without putting energy in anything. Like if we want to get good at something, we've got to put energy into something. So, but anyways, breath work. It comes from India, from the yogis, and it's they had a Sanskrit word called pranayama, and prana is life force, and they kind of figured out a long time ago. I mean, duh, right? The number one need that we need is oxygen. It's our breath. It's the first thing that we do when we come out of the womb, and it's the last thing before we die. Our breath goes out, and we're gone. And so, pretty important. But basically, they figured out that they could go ahead, that we could breathe a certain way to get to different states of consciousness, to meditations, and that's what I'm going to share with you guys today. Now, the benefits. There are tons and tons of different benefits of doing breath work. I'm only going to reach a little bit, but basically the main ones that I really care about is it helps with anxiety, with depression, with PTSD, with addiction, with trauma, with focus. But most importantly, I think for me in this context is it helps you bring self-awareness. It helps you, how do you want to say it? Yeah, it just helps you be in the present moment. Like you're not thinking about the past, you're not thinking about the future, the only thing that you have control right now is right now. And that's really important too, because most of us are either stuck. Like if you got trauma, if you got a bunch of baggage, that's the past. It's gone, but we're focused on that. And then the other half is we're focused on, oh my God, the future, what it's going to look like. I don't have enough money, all this stuff. But it's this moment right now that matters. And that's what it is. That's what I'm really trying to teach you guys with this technique is you become self-aware. You start noticing your ego, your thoughts, your actions, your shadows. You start asking those important questions that we need to do right, like as soon as possible is, who am I? What's my purpose? Do I have control of my life? What is real? What beliefs aren't mine? Like all of these really important questions that we really have to or should start asking ourselves when we go down this path. So now with this breath technique, there's two main parts. The first one is the charging breath. We're just breathing. It's not passive, like 12 breaths per minute. It's like we're working out our lungs. Okay, we're like, okay, it's going to look like that. Okay, it's charging breath, and literally what we're doing is we're taking as much oxygen in our bodies as possible. Okay, we're just basically alkalining ourselves. And what's really cool with that is that science has shown that when there's enough oxygen in the body, then disease and cancer and other diseases can't survive when your body's alkaline. And when you do this kind of breath work, it usually lasts, it bumps up your pH for about 6 to 12 hours. So pretty cool with that. So the first stage is we're just breathing. The second stage is our breath retention or our breath holds. And when we hold our breath, we create CO2. Now that CO2 activates the vagus nerve, which connects your brain to your heart, to your lungs, to your gut. And that's like the switch, okay, that turns on your parasympathetic nervous system. That's the vagus nerve. And when we do that, that puts you into a meditative state. And that's what's so cool about this breath technique I'm going to show you today is that you don't have to have any experience. When I started on this journey, I was called to, like my intuition's like, you need to learn to meditate. And I actually took 2 courses on meditation on my bike ride in Mexico. And I only got to chapter 3, I think 3 or 4 on each one because I just didn't get it. I didn't understand it. Like what do you mean not think? I didn't understand it. But with this breath work, like it worked. It worked on the first try for me. Like I cleared my mind. And I've never been able to be in that kind of peace in my entire life. And so I knew I was onto something. It was like, holy shit. And so back in the day when I was doing, my workshops, I would actually literally say like, breathwork is meditation for dummies. Because if I can do it, ADHD addict, constantly thinking in my mind all the time, 24/7. If I can do it, then anybody can. And really, I've designed this technique in the last 5 years to get the optimal. Like basically, we'll be doing 4 rounds. The breathing and the breathing part's 20 minutes. I mean, with the retentions, and then the last 10 minutes is just sitting in silence and meditating. And I'd say 90% of people will be in a meditative state by default. Like you don't have to do anything, you just got to breathe, and stay with an intention that you want, and that's it. It's super easy. Okay. So yeah, basically we want to breathe. Oh yeah, I was gonna say with the CO2, what's cool about the CO2 as well is it actually helps absorb the oxygen in your cells down in the mitochondria to create ATP. So like oxygen and CO2 work together to create more energy for you. Okay, so basically we're breathing and then we hold our breath, and that activates the vagus nerve, and that's what puts us into a meditative state. That puts us into an alpha and theta frequency. Now, what is that? Now I'm going to geek out for the next few moments and explain to you about the different frequencies in our brain, because there is science that backs this up, and it makes a lot of sense. And when I started researching all this, I just loved it so much that I actually got my hypnotherapist certification, because I found out that I'm actually putting people into hypnosis when you're in that meditative state, and that's where the magic happens. And so anyways, I'm going to explain to you that in just a few moments. All right, the 5 brain waves. What are they? So in our brain, there's constantly 5 different frequencies, like an FM or AM station. They're in hertz as well. So it's just a frequency, and hertz is a measurement of that frequency. You've heard of like gigahertz, like the cell towers. It's all done through radio waves in hertz. And so basically our brains, our bodies are big like transmitters. And it's kind of cool to think about that, because that's how we get these ideas, intuition from, people downloads or people that channel. It's what our brains are there. We're guidance for our higher selves or whatever that you believe in. So something to think about. And so we have 5 primary brainwaves. The first one is gamma, then beta, then alpha, then theta, then delta. Okay, so the first one we're going to talk about is gamma. Okay, so gamma is associated with higher processing tasks, cognitive functioning, problem solving, learning, memory, information processing, and it's between 40 and 100 hertz. Okay, now if you've ever studied so hard that your brain hurts, that's gamma. If you've ever been in, let's say, you love doing something, some kind of hobby, and like 5 hours goes by, but only and it seems like just an hour, that's usually gamma. It's when you put a lot of focus into something, and it takes a lot of energy to be in gamma. So a lot of time when you go through this, you'll be hungry because you've burned a lot of calories just processing at those higher frequencies. And it's a good place to be. It's also called the flow state. Okay, that kind of reminds me of back in the day, back when my early college years, when I was getting partying and everything. But I wasn't the best student because I partied too much. But I'd be a crammer. So like when finals came in that week, I would just go to the library without any distractions with my box of Peter Vella. If you don't know what that is, it's a box of cheap wine. And so I literally would be drinking and studying for like 8-10 hours every single for a week. And like I'd be studying and it didn't seem like it because I was so into it that it seemed like just a few hours, but like 8 hours, 9 hours had gone by. And by the time I was done, my brain was like, oh my God. And no, it wasn't the alcohol, it was just me being able to focus. So anyways, So I'm not gonna talk too much about gamma because that's not where I'm headed here today with this topic, but there's more, there's constantly new information coming out with gamma and meditation, but I'm not going to get too much into it. Okay, so the next frequency is beta. Now, in beta, it's associated with normal waking consciousness and alertness. This is the frequency that most people operate in 90% of the day. It's our normal operating system. Okay, our habits, our identity are there, logic, analyzing. Okay, now it's between 12 and 40 hertz. Okay, now what's really cool about this is in the 90s, when fMRIs, MRIs, EEG machines were coming out and getting popular, all this research was getting like conducted on the brain, and they discovered all this wonderful thing. But most importantly for this, they found out three things. First, that cortisol is created in beta and gamma frequency. Okay, it's produced there when it's activated. And cortisol, if you don't know, is your stress hormone. Now, if you ever go to get blood work, that's one of the first things they check is like, what's your cortisol levels at? And right now, if you don't know or haven't noticed in this world, like, there's a lot of things going on, and we as a society, and especially in the Western world, our stress level is way up, and it shouldn't be. Now, when that cortisol is up, it affects you in so many different ways. It affects your endocrine system, your immune system, your lymphatic system. So much of your body's affected by that stress, constant stress that people go through every single day. Now, with this, it's also like for cortisol, its main thing that it does is it helps regulate mood, motivation, and fear. Okay, so, and it's not bad per se, just not all the time. There's times that we need to be to have that, have cortisol in our bodies, but not all of the time. Now, another thing I wanted to mention about cortisol, it's also related to the sympathetic nervous system, your fight, flight, or freeze. So if you have elevation, if your blood has elevated, cortisol, that usually means that your nervous system is kind of shot with, that fight, flight, or freeze. So that means you have your anxiety, your depression, those kind of things coming up with that. Okay, so that operates. That is released in those frequencies, gamma and beta. Also, what they found out is that there's a place in the middle of your brain, part of the reptilian part of your brain, called the basal ganglia. Now, this is your reward center or your addiction center. Okay, and its main purpose is just to go from A to B to get that hit of dopamine. Okay, it doesn't care who you are, your aspirations, anything about you. Okay, it just wants that hit. And this totally made sense to me when I found this out. I was like, holy shit, this is why I couldn't do meditation, because even when I was trying to sit still and trying to get out of my mind, that basal ganglia was constantly going, firing. I was thinking weeks, months ahead of how I was going to pleasure myself, what fun things I was going to do. And that's why it didn't work for me. So that's operating in beta and in gamma, okay? And lastly, these scientists found out that in beta, that is where your ego lives. Okay, this is really interesting. And your ego is there to protect your current identity. Now, your ego is neutral. It's kind of like your basal ganglia. There's no logic to it. It's there. As long as you're alive, you're going to have an ego. And it's not a bad thing. Like, your ego is just protecting your current identity. When you change your identity, it will go with it. And I'm going to make a whole video on identity and ego because it's pretty sweet. Pretty cool topic to talk about. But basically, our identity is built from our past, from our first memory into the present moment until you become aware of this. And that's the thing with identity. Your identity is made from the past, but the past is already done. And yet, so many of us are focused on the past. And that was my case. When I did this breath work, I realized, I was like, this is not me. I realized in this state of consciousness, this meditation, I'm like, this trauma is not me, and yet it has been taken over my life for over 20 years. And it was that aha moment that was just, I needed to understand that. And that's the beauty of meditation, breathwork. You get to see things as an observer instead of reacting, all the time with this. So, and another thing with the ego, like what happens when you become aware and you want to change, then you sabotage yourself. It's that little devil. That's the ego. It's there because it knows everything about you, and it's just protecting you because it knows that it's going to be so difficult to change your current identity. It wants to stay safe. And it's like I said, it's not thinking. It's looking at you. It doesn't, like, consciously that you would be better off if you could let something go. But the ego is like, no, that's a lot of work, man. Like, I like the way you are just like right now. You're going to have to go through so many physical and mental like things if you decide to change this identity of yours. So it's just doing its job, but it's also pushing you for this. And so that's what I mean by bringing awareness to that ego, that self, to your shadows, to all of it. You want to be aware of it so you can actually do something with it. So beta, like I said, it's also, so basically, yeah, the takeaways from beta, which is pretty big, is it creates cortisol. You got the basal ganglia, your addiction center, and then your ego, your thoughts are constantly going in this frequency. Like I said, it's 95% of the day you're in this beta frequency. And it's also correlated with reacting. Okay, when you react to the external world. When something happens or you see something you don't like, you're reacting, and that's just that is part of that frequency. Okay, so the next frequency is alpha. Now in alpha, it's dominant during quietly flowing thoughts, daydreams, light meditation. It's the frequency between the conscious thinking mind, the neocortex, and the subconscious mind, and it's between 8 and 12 hertz. Now, interestingly enough, once you cross over from beta to alpha, all of the beta characteristics subdue or subside. Is that the same thing? I don't know. But you're no longer creating cortisol, okay? So you're no longer in that state of fear, doubt, the mood, all that kind of stuff. When you get to that alpha, your basal ganglia goes dormant. And I always kind of looked at it like the Indian snake charmer playing the flute and the cobra just kind of dancing. It's literally what it's doing. And this is why I was able to meditate. This is why it worked. This is why I had that aha moment during my session, being like, this is what meditation, this is what it is. It's like, whoa, I was able to get out of my mind because I wasn't thinking about my five senses. So pretty cool with that. And also the ego, and lastly, the ego and the identity kind of just, they disappear. And what I mean by that is like you're no longer focused you're no longer that person in the past or the future. You're just in the present moment. And that's really important because now you're not judging. And now you can look in the past and look at it as an observer. And that's what happens when you cross over from beta. Beta, you're reacting. And when you're in alpha in meditation, now you observe. And you observe without judgment. And this is why it's so great. You can do a lot. You can work on your shadows a lot when you're just breathing. And it's the same thing when if you go to an ayahuasca ceremony or psilocybin, it's the same concept. You become the observer of what is going on, and instead of becoming like in beta, when you're in that frequency, you are the trauma. Like this stuff is you. When you get to meditation or psychedelic experiences, now you're the observer, and now you're observing the trauma. You're not the trauma. You're just observing it, and when you can see it from a different perspective, you can see things and you're able to forgive and let things go a lot easier when you're observing and realize that you're not that. That the past is the past. You're not that. Okay. So that's alpha. You cross that line, and all of that subsidues, and that's what's so amazing. That's why we want to be in that state as much as possible. Okay. Now that's just light meditation. Everybody that does this will be, like I said, not everybody, the majority of people will be in this state when they get done. But the next state, the next frequency after that is theta. Now in theta is associated with daydreaming, vivid imagery, creativity, intuition, and information beyond normal consciousness, aka downloads, that clarity that we get. And its frequency is between 4 and 8 hertz. Okay. What's cool about this? Theta is hypnosis. And so if you go to a hypnotherapist, they are going to put you in a trance state in theta, and then they're going to talk to you with NLP and other techniques to talk to the subconscious, because that's where all the programs, all the trauma, everything is stored there. And they're going to talk to you a certain way, with like the subconscious loves metaphors and stories. So we, talk to you a certain way to help reprogram beliefs, different things like that. But theta is hypnosis, and we get to do this to ourselves. We get to basically self-hypnotize when we do breath work, and when we are aware of the things that we need to work on. It's very, very powerful to bring awareness to our life consciousness. Okay. The next one, the last one, is delta, and most people have heard of delta frequency. It is sleep. Okay, it is deep sleep. It's in between 0 and 4 hertz, so very slow. Now, children, they need to sleep. They sleep to grow. As adults, we need sleep to heal. And what's really cool about sleep, and I'm just a big dork, between breath work and sleep, like I say, I'm an expert at sleep. But basically when we sleep, that's when we rejuvenate ourselves and we detox. And so basically every night, if you go, it usually takes around 3 to 4 hours to break down and digest all your food. And this is important because in our Western society, our biggest meal is in the evening, and that taxes the liver. But when you give it time, like 3 to 4 hours, to break it down and go to bed, now your stomach is empty, and now your liver gets a break, and now your liver gets to go ahead and detox. And then it's your spleen, and I think your gallbladder at the same time, then your kidneys. And so every night, by just timing it right, you get a mini detox, and it helps you sleep better because you're not using that energy to break down your food. Okay, that was a little thing, but I'm a little dork when it comes to sleep as well. So now with delta, what's really important with delta, with all of it, is kids. So kids from 0 to 7 years old are in delta and theta. Okay, super important to understand that. So like my 9-month-old baby, he sleeps for most of the day, and then when he wakes up, he's in a trance state. He's literally in hypnosis. And it's kind of a funny joke that my wife and I, we did a lot of psychedelics and acid back in the day, and it's funny to watch our son. He's out in the grass, he's taking leaves, and he's just like, well, and we kind of joke around, like, God, I wonder if it's just a big acid trip, because it sure looks like it. But he's in hypnosis. And so also something to think about is, like, in hypnosis, it's really important that if you're like if you're thinking about having kids or have kids right now, understand that whatever they see and hear, they believe, and we adults do the same. And so even before they can walk or talk or understand language, they are learning by how you interact with people, with emotions. They're just really absorbing those emotions that you put out. And so just understand the first 7 years is so important to just be conscious about the screen time that they get. And it's actually one of the reasons that we moved our family to Mexico, because we couldn't, our whole society revolves around screens, and it just didn't resonate with us anymore. It didn't matter where we went to our friend's house, we went to daycare, we went to the gym, we went, everywhere has screens that didn't really, and that's the thing, is I know now what this does to the human condition, the mind. And so just understand, if you're watching a screen, you're getting conditioned to believe somebody else's reality. And the only reality that is yours is actually what's in front of you. And so just keep that in mind. I'm going to talk more about that in another video as well. That's really, really interesting. So from 0 to 7, they're in delta and theta. From 7 to 12, they hit alpha. And that's why from 0 to 7, all your beliefs, everything is done by 12. After that, you're effed. Okay, not effed, but it's hard to work on that. And we become adults, and then we have to work on ourselves later in life. But most of our trauma, most of our beliefs are set by 12. And then from as soon as they hit puberty, they go into beta, and that is when they get the ego. And this is really important to understand, because that's why we're little shits when we're teenagers because we're really trying to identify with something, and we don't have really good role models. Like no one teaches us this. Like my parents didn't teach me this. The school didn't teach me this, and so we have a bunch of like young adults trying to figure out who we are, and we have Facebook and YouTube, and we have school, which is basically your teacher. So you have like, what's cool? How should I act? What should I dress? And that's just because you're in that beta frequency, and now you have an ego. And so in ancient civilizations, they used to have rites of passage. They would have ceremonies or vision quests where they would take young men and women, and they would have different ceremonies, and they explain what, now you're a man, now you're a woman, this is what's expected of you. And they would talk to more about this esoteric concept of ego. They have different names for it and whatnot, of how things work. And I think that that is missing. Kids understand. Imagine if I was taught this, or if you're watching this, if you were taught this when you were just hitting puberty, instead of just like, yeah, dude, you're gonna be horny and you're just gonna do this and that. Like, what about there's some context to this? And so, anyways, I'm really excited to actually do this. My kids are young, they're only 3.5 and 9 months, but I'm actually really looking forward to creating a vision quest for them and guiding them through this huge, I'd say this is probably one of the biggest life changes, is that puberty part of being human. So let's see if there's anything else I need to say. Oh yeah, so we go through this cycle twice a day. So in the morning we go from delta, theta, alpha, and beta. And then at night we do the opposite. We go from beta, alpha, theta, delta. The only problem is we're only in those frequencies like theta and alpha for just like 5-10 minutes, And so how do we go back? How do we harvest that alpha and theta frequency? Because for everything I just said, we want to bring that back. So of course there's breath work, there's different meditations, there's qigong, there's tai chi. There's all sorts of different modalities that help calm the nervous system down, so you can operate at those frequencies more often. And because that's prayer in a sense. Like when we can calm the nervous system down and just turn this on low, then we're able to get a lot of clarity and start understanding intuition, start operating from a soul's perspective instead of up here. And so so our main so what we want to do is we want to make alpha our baseline. And so this is actually pretty quick, like I said, it took me 6 months doing this twice a day to really adjust my nervous system, where now I operate mostly, I would say, I don't have an EEG machine, but from what I used to be, I'm completely different. It's like, holy shit. But basically I see myself dipping in and out of alpha and beta all the time. And that's what we kind of, that's what I picture. That's what I want, I still want to use logic when I need to, but I also want to connect more and use more of my intuition and get more, I want to be more in that state of flow with the divine. So if I'm up here if your nervous system is shot, if your fight, flight, or freeze is activated most of the day, you're not going to be able to hear that inner voice. You're not going to get that guidance. You're not going to learn to trust that intuition. And so that's what we really want to do. We're retraining the nervous system and we're retraining the mind. And so the more and more we can get into these states, the more it becomes us. And like I said, 6 months. But now on my baseline, instead of being in beta, fight, flight, or freeze all the time, 80%, 90% of the day, now, like I said, I have no idea, but now I'm in low betas, high alphas all through the day. And yes, I get triggered, I get mad, especially when you have kids, you're gonna get triggered. Oh my God, they're the best teachers in the world. I love being a dad though. But yeah, you're in and out of alpha, beta, or low beta, whatever. And yes, sometimes you'll peak, and then, but you'll realize it and get way back, because that is your normal baseline. So before, your baseline was beta, and so no matter what, you're all constantly stressed out, and that's that cortisol. But now you've regulated that cortisol, and I know I've had cortisol tests and stuff, and it's low. It's just I'm not stressed out. It's awesome. And so basically that is what we're doing. The only way to do this is by practicing. But like I said, it doesn't take that long, and it's really fast. So that's what we want to do. That's what I was going to say before I end this, is we want to be able to make alpha our baseline. Just think about it. Wouldn't that be nice if we could just be chill and just observe? Yeah. So let's get into the technique. Here we go.